At 1 o'clock here right now, so let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. We've got a lot of information to cover, so we'll just dive right into it here. And just want to start off with a few welcome items here before we get started. Today we're going to be talking about trends in demographics and behavioral preferences that are changing what enrollment looks like in higher education. Presentation should last about 30 minutes. That allows us with some time at the end for questions and conversations and so forth, but certainly as we're going today, please feel free to jump in to the chat area and send any questions that you have either through chat or through the questions. We'll try to stop and answer those as time permits as we're going along. If it's a question that's more appropriate for us to wait until the end, we'll do that. Or if we're unable to get to all of the questions, we'll certainly reach out to you individually and make sure that we get back with you. So we've got some great presenters for you today, and I want to introduce you to Carol Aslanian. Carol is the president of Aslanian Market Research, which is a division of Education Dynamics. She is an authority on the characteristics and learning patterns of adult students. She has made hundreds of presentations on this topic and has led market research projects for more than 300 colleges and universities. My name is Eric McGee. I'm the Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications here at Education Dynamics. And I've got almost 15 years of higher education experience, starting with my time as the Director of Continuing Education at the University of South Carolina, and then for the past 6 years, working in various roles in organizations that partner with and serve colleges and universities. Just a little bit about Education Dynamics. We are a full-service enrollment management partner for colleges and universities. So we offer services from market research to enrollment funnel support, including marketing services, contact and communication management, and full enrollment and retention support services. We'll talk a little bit more about some free resources that we have available for you at the end. So certainly feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about our services and solutions that we offer. I did want to tell you just a little bit about Aslanian Market Research as well. As I mentioned, Carol has an extensive experience in higher education and in market research. As an organization, Aslanian Market Research has done 8 major publications on trends and post-traditional students in learning, and has worked with over 250 market analysis studies for all different types of institutions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol here, who's, as I said, the presentation should last about 30 minutes, but please feel free to send any questions in as they arrive.
Thanks, Eric. And I know you noticed and mentioned 30 minutes often, so I need to keep to that deadline. And those of you in the audience who know me realize how difficult sometimes it is to do that, but I'll do the best I can. Today, we've labeled this webinar a new landscape or an evolving higher education population. And I'm wondering how new it is to many of you when I saw who signed up for this webinar. You've been seeing these changes over a number of years, but many of us have not paid probably due attention to who it is that is evolving in higher education. And since we've done a lot of research on this and we've worked hand in hand with many institutions, we thought it would be good to give you our update and where we think things are going and what you need to do to maintain, but hopefully grow your enrollments. So I thought it'd be best to start probably with a overview of where we have been over the years. And I've been there right with you for many, many years. And I want to start with that 3-decade period from the 1970s to 2000, where we all witnessed steady growth of that adult population, we called it. And that was the trend. And I remember when I went first over to the College Board in the 80s, the College Board, the SAT, PSAT people, and what did they want to do with someone who has been studying the adult market? But they saw the changes that were going on and the steady growth of this population. And in fact, one of the biggest grants we got in that period of time, way early in the history of adult students, was Future Directions for a Learning Society by the Exxon Foundation. That was way back in the 80s. So some of us knew that things were going to grow in a different direction. The main objective of the 25-year-old population for most colleges, I remember, was revenue. Offices of continuing education, deans of enrollment, continuing education, extended education, and so forth. You were all there not to gain support from your institution monetarily, but to give money back. And that was the reason that many of us were able to grow in the 80s and 90s and produce the types of programs that we called adult students wanted. Back then it was adult students. We needed to keep them separate from the traditional students. So we created divisions and units somewhere on campus, not directly on campus in most respects. And the main purpose of these units was to collect the revenue that we needed for the 18 to 22-year-old market, which was the central focus. And at that time, institutions needed more and more resources to maintain that focus and to attend to the needs of the 18 to 22-year-old population. So the steady growth of adults during that 3-decade period was very healthy for institutions that needed the income to do their and attend to their main function, which was primary function, which was the 18-year-old market. In that next decade, we see a number of changes happening. The traditional market required much more monetary financial support to enter education, so the revenue needs of our colleges went up, and online learning emerged with the entrance of the University of Phoenix with John Sperry and Sterling, John Sperling, and a number of for-profit institutions that saw the light and thought that this is a market area that they could grow on. I remember that one of the institutions, for-profits that I worked with quite closely, by 2010, announced that it had 485,000 online students. That was in 2010. I bet you all know who that was. And that was a huge success, and more institutions than ever were beginning to serve adults. Beginning to serve online, but primarily institutionally based, classroom based, whereas the for-profits began to look to that online market. Let's look at 2010 to 16. There became a dip in the high school market. I think many of you witnessed that, and the schools became a little bit concerned. And it's then where I professed a great deal. In fact, my staff is tired of hearing me say that that was a period of time when we learned that age no longer predicts the way people learn. Okay. And I often would say the children are learning like adults are learning. The children have become adults because they too wanted the flexibility and the convenience and the range of offerings that many were witnessing in the adult market. Children acting like adults, wanting the same kinds of services and efficiency. And another thing helped the growth of that adult market, and that was 60% of undergraduates did not finish in 4 years. And what does that do? It produces more and more adult students. Many students begin, they stop, they go off to work, they get married, they have children, and later in their 20s, maybe even early 30s, they say, I don't have the credentials I need to move on, and I better go back to school. And they came back as our quote unquote adult learners. And also in that 6-year period of time, many of you out there began entering that online markets because you saw from the Strayers and the Waldens and the Phoenixes, the 10% market they were beginning to attract. So you all got pretty interested in online starting, I'd say, around 2010, 2012, and because of the nature of the competition. Let's look at today. I think this is a kind of a shock to many people outside education, but we too look at this figure and get amazed. But that traditional undergraduate student, and by that I mean the typical traditional student of 18 to 22 years of age who studies full-time during the day, in residence or nearby the campus, is now only 30% of the market, okay? Enrollments are relatively flat these last several years, if not a bit down. And today we stand at about 19 million college students, 2.5 to 3 million are graduate students, and the rest are undergraduates. But we're witnessing rapidly changing demographics among the college-bound students, as you all well know. Many more first-generation students and many more minority students. So the same formula used in earlier times for traditional students doesn't always work, given the changes in who they are, what they want, and what they want to get to. And overall, as many of your colleagues on campus will tell you, those high school graduation numbers are down. The future of the traditional undergraduate education entity. I'm going to give you a few quotes here that you might want to share with your colleagues that sort of lean toward where we have been and where we're going. And so we have the first one from the Chronicle, where they said, until a few years ago, colleges could anticipate classes of high school graduates each year bigger than the last. Those days are over. And they reported that beginning in 2014. Next, the number of high school graduates nationwide is projected to remain relatively flat for the several years and will begin to drop heavily during the 26 and year period and beyond, 2026 and to 2031. The drop will be almost 9%. Now, this is from higher education. And in response to that recession, we witness childbearing has plummeted. In fact, I saw on the news the other day that 2018 was the lowest birth rate we've had in 32 years. So we're continuing that plummeting in childbearing. The number of college-age students will drop by almost 15% in just 5 years, and that's by a demographic organization. And the post-Great Recession baby boost, wow, that's a great number of words, will soon mean not enough students to keep small schools alive. And I just saw an article, and the articles keep coming out, particularly in New England, where small schools are closing or joining together to survive. Here are a few charts that would help, help you and your colleagues understand better actually what's happening, and look at that birth rate slant from 2003 to 2017, and that's a huge dip. High school graduation trends. If you go to the WICHE reports each year and look for your state, you'll see that we have been going through a slight decline. It's going to increase, but dramatically decrease by the year 2025, 2026. In fact, I was in New Jersey the other day with a college, and I took out the graduation trends for the state of New Jersey. And I would say from a couple of years back forward, it looked like a peak, a snow peak on a ski slope. It just went slamming down. So many of your institutions are facing that kind of situation. And of course, we all know it's much worse for the northeastern colleges, where we see article after article about closure and so forth. And also, I would say in the Midwest. Now, the good news, in contrast, we've got this growing post-traditional student market, which we have for some time, and where we all came from the history of what we would call adult learners, adult students. I personally, and a lot of my colleagues, are turning to this post-traditional terminology, which is not great, but the term adult now seems to be a bit out of place when so many of the students who study like adults are very much younger than they were before. But looking here, because the government quite hasn't caught up with the charts, they can only do 25 and older full-time enrollment as a percent of total, and look at that. By 2025, it'll be 2/3 of enrollment. So this is where you're heading, and this is what you have to accommodate to, this post-traditional market. And again, those are students who do not study full-time day in residence. The minority population at the same time has peaked in certain years, stable about now, and will decrease a bit, but will be a heavy percentage of the total population. So we've got to pay much more attention to the growing minority as well as first generation students. So what are some of the outcomes that you'll be facing as 2- and 4-year colleges? First of all, we can say the elite colleges, of course, will not be impacted. I think Harvard and Yale get their 40 applicants for every place they can offer, and it doesn't stop. So they will be steady and will be able to do what they've always wanted to do. Highly concentrated Northeastern colleges, and I want to add Midwestern as well, will compete for a smaller pool of local high school graduates who will come from a very close nearby local market. Institutions need to collaborate with each other for shared services, as I think some of you are doing, combining services, combining courses, and the Chronicle had a good article on this in 2018. Institutions need to react to the high discount rates, diminish revenue and enrollment goals. I think the average discount rate in colleges today is roughly 52%. That means you're not collecting half of the tuition you said you needed to run this operation. And where does that money come from? You can't take it away without finding a replacement. And so guess what? The full paying post-traditional adult student who doesn't get your scholarships and your institutional grants have become a major source of the income that your institutions need to stay alive and be able to draw students in. Second, what you need to do is react to their demands and preferences. We do lots of market analyses across the country to find out what's happening in Maine versus Ohio versus South Dakota in terms of what this post-traditional market wants, how they want it, and who they are considering, and what would it take to have them come to your place. Critical information that you need to shape your programs and services so they meet market demand. And next, you should need to look at alternative populations and refocus your recruitment and enrollment procedures so we look at first generation and minority students much harder than we ever have before. Institutions need to include the minorities and post-traditional students. By the way, if you look at that second bullet, the post-traditional students, in contrast to traditional, makes up 70% of the higher education market. Now, the Harvard, Yales, and Princetons don't have to worry about this because they're there with the 30%, but most of you out in the audience, and I looked at the list of people who are here, we need to focus on the 70% of the market given the steadiness or decline in the high school graduation market. So this has been a real transformation in higher education. And I want to share with you now what you need to do based on what this population looks like. And you'll see at the end of this presentation that you can have this resource if you go to our website. This was our national study of post-traditional undergraduate students. Footnote, we also have it for graduate students on our website. So those of you who are interested in what post-traditional, that is not day full-time in residence, graduate students are doing these days, we have a report on that as well. But we decided to focus on this post-traditional market for today's presentation. So this will tell you all about that 70% of the market that exists and that you all want to get a larger share of. What we did is a typical procedure. We go out to respondents across the nation. Of course, recently when we did a major study in Wisconsin, we limited it to the Wisconsin and contiguous states to Wisconsin to get our data. And number one, you could be of any age. We don't care what age you are, but you can't be full-time day in a classroom living on or near campus. That's the 70% market. And enrolled now, we don't talk to soft buyers or prospective buyers. We don't say where you'd like to go for your vacation. We'll ask you, where did you go? And right now, we only speak to people who have participated as undergraduate students, as a post-traditional student in the last 3 years, or have firm plans to do so in the next 12 months. That's because we want real hard demand data. We don't want soft expressions of need. So what did we learn? No surprise to many of you in the audience with the traditional adult market that you've been engaged in. We are primarily female, 2/3 female in this post-traditional market. Once upon a time, we'd say, what are the men doing? Or why do the women go back to school? Because this has been a tradition with adult education. One answer I got from an audience participant one time was that, well, women enter professions where continuous education is needed to keep up to date with your field, such as nursing and education and the social services. So that could help explain that. Here's the best news, or the new news I find. these post-traditional students cannot be called adult students, okay? And those of you who still run units that are based on age and work experience need to seriously reconsider those criteria, because they really have nothing to do with the interest in going back to school, especially age. We now have 30% of what we would call children acting like adults. These are people who want flexibility, convenience. They want 8-week courses, not 15-week courses. They want to have the opportunity to study online, blended, or in the classroom, and they want a fast response to their inquiries, and so on and so forth. Okay, the median age is 29. I can remember years ago where the median age was always sitting in the middle of the 30s. Now it's younger. So those of you who are part of units that are labeled by age or identified by older versus younger, you're missing the boat, because many of the students who are coming back as post-trad, not full-time day on campus, is your market. And I know what happened years ago. Your administrators would say, yes, but you're taking, when you don't have an age minimum, Jane, you're taken away from the day enrollment. That's no longer true. These people here, the 30%, are not going to go full-time day and pay the tuition you're asking for when they're working or married or have children. They need convenience. So you're not taking market share away from the traditional side of the campus. They're typically Caucasian, which has been true for many of the adult reports we've done, but the Black and Latino market is growing steadily and is now 25%. That Latino market is expected to go up into the 30s, within another decade. So we have to be much more sensitive to this. Employment status, well, guess why they want flexibility? 65% of them are working, and most of them are working full-time. They're handling all kinds of life roles, just like those quote-unquote adults did in the 80s and 90s and the first decade of the century. So they're not going to stop working to go to graduate school and take off and live on campus for 4 years or 2 years like they once did. No, they want to get the degree in the shortest period of time from a reputable institution that can give them what they want to advance in their careers. Now, how can these very busy people study full time? It's very easy. You guys help them do that. You're offering back-to-back courses over 12 months of 6 to 8 weeks duration, and that's the right formula. These are individuals. These are individuals who say, I don't need to be home in May or January. I don't need my summers off entirely. I want to get over this, and I'd like to do it in 2.5 or 3 years. Give me, shorter courses, give me frequent enrollment times, and I am with you. So this full-time status does not surprise us at all. If it surprises you, then you may not be appealing in the right way to this market. Here's an interesting one. The major demand is for hybrid study. And I noticed from the participants on the list here, we have hybrid is very good for many of you because you live in, rather populated areas where people might want a little touch and feel of the classroom. And so you offer some of the instruction online and some of the instruction in a classroom. And any of that combination where you have classroom and online comes out to be a heavily favored kind of alternative. But then again, not everybody can do what they like or prefer. So you look at the online market, which is 24% here. And by the way, the actual percent today is roughly 20%, okay? 20% of all college students of any age study fully online. The preferred format here is 24%, which means that many of them would like, and remember this was a preferred question, many of them would like to study in a hybrid arrangement because they like a little bit of that campus feel. And by the way, we worked with a great institution in the South that figured out that even when they wanted hybrid and they couldn't make it to every classroom a session, they did Zoom sessions so that if you had to miss, you could get the classroom by Zoom and you had to stay at home, or they would record the session and send it to you. Great ideas. And on all classroom, I wouldn't even think about it. It's only 17%. Most important enrollment factors. Yeah, the tuition and fees. What else do you expect? Half of them think that that is the most important. But you know, if you can't, I've not met many colleges who reduce their fees. So if you can't give them back tuition and fees, then think of flexible schedules. Think of the locations of your campus for blended programs, not classroom, and the availability of online. Okay, you can do other things to compensate for price, but price is very, very important. In fact, the scholarships are very important. We, in one of our recent studies, we asked whether a $500 scholarship to an institution would make a difference in considering it, and the answers were overwhelmingly yes. They like the idea of small gifts so that they can run home and tell wife or husband or children that you're really wanted by that institution. They're even giving me, quote unquote, a scholarship. So what are your next steps? You got to react to your competition. And footnote, in our online study, which is coming out for 2019 on June 4th, which I hope you contact me about, and we'll get you a copy. The increased competition will be increasing for the post-traditional students as it has for the traditional students, okay? And so you need to know who your competition is. And by the way, in that online study, we found out that online students, 70% of online students learn with an institution within 100 miles of the college campus. I suspect this is very true of the post-traditional students as well. So your closest competition are your neighbors. So you got to know what they're offering, where and to whom, and what's working for them that you can learn from, and so on and so forth. So yes, they know best. You'll be invaded. I remember up in Northeast Wisconsin recently for Concordia College, when we looked at where, for example, the online students were learning, my God, the institutions came from everywhere, because if they had it locally, they would have gone locally, but there was a dearth of opportunities for online in that particular region of the state. So they went elsewhere. You need to be aware of what these institutions are offering and to learn where your students are considering. When you get inquirers or applicants, find out where they applied, who they considered, and then the best question is, why us, okay? Increased speed to lead is very important. You know, our research has found that students enroll typically in the first institution that contacts them, all right? They tend to enroll in 2 and maybe 3, but the first one that contacts them is ready on the spot and can talk about financial matters, by the way. Can't give them concrete examples right away, but at least what the opportunities are. It's very important to get to them as soon as you can. So look at that enrollment funnel and the staffing of it and how you can make it even quicker and more informative. Institutions will need to contact these students as soon as they apply or inquire. Well, this is the one we just did, sorry. Ensure added value. You got to set yourself apart from your competing institutions, which, by the way, are within 100 miles of where you reside. What other services do they want? What other value propositions can you give them? Can you have new arrangements and payments? We find that career services are very important now more than ever before. So one good thing is to find out what your area population wants from you and how that and what you can do to outsmart your competition. So I hope this is just a bit of the information in our report, and I hope it's useful to you. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol.
And if we have any questions, we'd love them.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. Just want to quickly, if you could go forward one more slide, Carol.
This one.
So we, one more, yeah, there we go. So we do have a few resources that you can download from our website. We'll also include these in the post-webinar emails and so forth that we send out. So we did, one of the first questions that we got was whether the presentation slides would be available. You should see under handouts a place where you can download those. And if you would like to request a free assessment, go ahead and answer this poll here, or send us an email, and we'll be happy to get in touch with you. You can request either a paid search marketing campaign or social media campaign assessment, or many of you may be interested in the secret shopper audit. So feel free to go ahead and complete that assessment if you'd like more information about that. Okay, so did want to answer a few questions here that we got in. One of the first questions that we got, Carol, was is it best to have each course delivered in a hybrid form, or have some courses that are online and others that are in classroom?
Well, the hybrid is some online and some in the classroom.
Okay.
So repeat that question again.
So I think the question was, do the students want specifically hybrid, where each class blends both online and classroom elements, or is it a mix of the two? They want some classes online and some classes.
It's the mix of the two mediums. Yes.
In a single class, wrapped in a single class.
Yes, because otherwise you're still requiring them to come to class. Although you can, you can have assignments and research projects and so forth online at their own time, but they still have to do their 45 clock hours in the classroom.
Sure. Okay. So the ideal situation is they might do 3/4 of their work or more in an online format, and then they might come to class 1 or 2 times per semester or something.
Well, it's usually you'd have to check what the current mode is, but I think it's much more off. It's roughly like 50-50.
Okay, perfect. So another question that we got was about the speed to lead. If you could address that a little bit more specifically, what is a quick speed to lead return? Is it 24 hours or is it faster? And are there any resources that we have that would provide data on such things?
That we have, meaning Education Dynamics.
Absolutely.
And could that be in your territory, Eric?
I
would say
yes.
I think within 24, no more than 24 hours, I would say. And within a handful of hours is good. Within an hour is great. And the for-profits are there within 1 or 2 minutes.
Right, and that's what I was just going to say, is that we have seen that we have data that shows the number of students that end up enrolling with the first school that touches them is very, very high. Yes. And that is often happening within a few minutes. So 24 yes. hours is certainly relatively very late in the game there. So we do have some resources
I agree.
that we'd be happy to share there too.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close. It also probably depends on how your reputation and your presence in that community. If they hear from a lot of others who are at a distance, they may get to you within that. You may get to them within the 24 hours, and it could make a difference because you're nearby and you have a good reputation. So there are things that could offset quickness if you have them within your baggage.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So one other question that we have here is, what is the primary motivation for post-traditional students enrolling?
Career advancement. Okay. Career increases in salary.
Perfect. All right, we have one more question here. Do you have any data that you could share regarding best practices for recruitment activities in recruiting post-traditional online students that are looking for exclusively online?
That's kind of in your backyard, is it, Eric?
Yeah, the answer is we certainly do. And one of the first places that I would recommend that you start is you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you. We can put you in touch with some of the resources we have. That secret shopper audit, if it's specifically focused on a specific program that you want to look at, we could certainly use that as an opportunity to share some of the best practices and recommendations that would be specific to your school.
I have another comment to make if there's not another question waiting.
I don't think there is.
Okay, and that is when I visit colleges, almost like on a weekly basis these days, and we do these audits where we come in and assess the way you are right now and what the market is bearing and recommend ways to go in the future. Many of you are still maintaining traditional kind of units to serve the older population. And I think you're missing the boat to a larger extent with the post-traditional market, because they're not looking for special programs. They're looking at Biola University, or they're looking at Suffolk University, and they want to know, do you have the program I want at the time I need it? Will you accept prior credits? Footnote, these post-traditional students on average bring in 30 credits, which they want you to accept, and because that means time and money to them. So you need to be positioned in a way so that this is not the 1980s and 1990s where we, glamorized our divisions of adult and continuing education, and they did so much to help the universities. But now we have a population that transcends age. And so we can't have age-based operations. Because then the student doesn't know exactly what he or she is getting or what you're after.
Okay, fantastic.
Certainly I would recommend there should be no age minimums and no work requirements.
Fantastic. Carol, do you want to share your screen with our contact information there, that last little slide?
Okay. This one?
I think you'll have to click on share screen again.
Share screen.
I will send out an email with our contact information. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much for attending today. We're happy to stick around and answer any other questions that do come in, but it looks like that's about the end of the webinar. And again, we appreciate you attending, and we'll send a copy of the presentation slides as well as a copy of the recording for you so that you can share